今天我们故事的主人公呢，他是一位美籍的建筑系教授。那就在美国疫情大爆发的初期，他做了一件非常棒的事情。那他在网络上呢，动员了300多名的志愿者，跟他一起呢，利用3D 打印机打印了很多应急口罩，发放给民众。那他呢，就是建筑大师黄述飞，他的作品呢，也是遍布全世界。那今天呢，我们就一起来拜访一下他。
大家好，我是Yuqi。美国华裔群体中有一个响亮的名字，Alvin Huang。他曾在新冠疫情前线用3D 打印机生产应急口罩，为洛杉矶医疗系统保驾护航。2022年3月，他召集美国亚裔喜剧家在好莱坞上演脱口秀演出《Crazy Funny Asians》，疯狂搞笑的亚洲人，呼吁世界反对亚裔仇恨及犯罪。他的艺术造诣浑然天成，天马行空的建筑设计装点着世界。今天我带大家和我一起拜访建筑大师黄述飞。
Hey.
Hi, Alvin.
Hi, Yuqi. How's it going?
Good.
Nice to see you.
I'm paying homage to our Trojan Red today.
All right, fight on.
Fight on.
Come on in.
So this is your natural habitat.
Yes, this is where the magic happens.
Where the magic happened. I also feel like I'm on a time machine. I went to USC,
Okay.
went to Annenberg, and now I'm back on campus. And
Welcome back.
Thank you, and I'm thoroughly enjoying this energy. So the action is back on campus.
Yeah, we've been back on campus starting this last fall semester, but prior to that we were entirely remote. As an architect, my professional office, we actually closed the office space and we're working entirely remotely since June of 2020. So the entire office operates now from different houses. As an educator, everything was remote up until this last fall, and we've been back in person now with masks until this past week. So now we're, without masks again, which has been nice.
It's a milestone.
Oh, it's great to see faces again.
I know.
The big issue here is that whether it's with students or with my team or with my clients and my stakeholders and all of the kind of collaborative work that we do, the individual creation and ability to focus and produce work may have even gone up, working alone in isolation, but the ability to collaborate and connect and create a studio culture or office culture that exists beyond the direct interaction of, like, say, Zoom, which is very direct, as opposed to indirect, like the lateral conversations between people that are not in direct conversation, right? So sometimes in a meeting, there's the main conversation, which is what Zoom is good for.
Yeah.
But then there's secondary and tertiary conversations that are happening on the side, like, did you hear what he said? Or, what do you think about this?
That's so true.
Which don't get to happen anymore. There's far less of the sort of chance stimulus or the chance inspiration. I think one of the very big positive things about, like, say, working in a studio environment is not just the ability to work on what you're doing, but to walk past other people and see what they're doing and see what's on other people's screens, see what's on their desk, be able to comment, and hear things, and just kind of, even when somebody has a question of just like, oh, how do I do this?
Yeah.
You can help them with it, or they can help you with it, and that kind of thing when you're on Zoom and working in isolation doesn't happen.
You identify yourself as architect, educator, and design thinker.
Yep.
I love that thinker part. How does that thinking part manifest in your design process?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that as an architect and as an educator, the most important thing what I do is actually reflect critically on the built environment and society and try to think about how we can actually question more before we answer. And I think the best design solutions are actually sparked by the best design problems, meaning you actually have to define the problem or define the question before you answer it. And I think most people are jumping straight into solutions or answers before trying to rethink the question. And I think for me, that's what's most important. And I think when a student gets a project brief or when I get a brief from a client, what the client is giving me is the generic problem, right? Like the generic problem is I want a house, or I want a hotel, or I want an office tower. But the more specific problem is me questioning that client in terms of what are their values, what are their value systems, what is the purpose of this building, what's the site, what are the opportunities, what are the contexts, what's the historical context, what's the political context, and thinking about how that project actually has specific forces acting on it that are outside of its solutions, but actually can provoke different responses. And I think that's where the part of thinking really comes in for me.
It's like solving a puzzle, connecting the dots.
Yes, it is. But I think what's important there is that I create the puzzle, or the architect creates the puzzle, right? Like we're not just trying to come up with that answer to that first question right away, right? Because that answer actually has to have far more nuance and far more introspection in terms of understanding what the actual problem is. What's the bigger problem, or what's the hyper-specific problem that makes that result stand out from, because every building, you could say that you could just do it. You could come up with one problem, one project, and produce hundreds of different answers to that same one. But why are they different? And that's the important thing, is trying to figure out what is it that makes it important for it to be different than the other solutions. Because personally, I believe in bespoke design. So design that is unique and tailored and specific to certain individuals, certain sites, and certain conditions.
For every artist, there is an internal urge to express. And I feel like for every artist, there's also an internal compass. As human beings, we need that equilibrium in our body, in our real life. Do you feel like in your design process, you're also looking for that equilibrium?
I definitely don't see myself as an artist. I see myself as an architect and a designer and, as you said, a thinker. Equilibrium in this particular instance is a balance between, let's say, functionality and practicality, but also a balance with vision and uniqueness. And I think one of the things that is really important is about experience, and what architecture can provide is that balance between, let's say, artistic expression and practicality and utility, but also performance. And performance is something that I think is really important, where it's not just, you know, there's a very famous quote by Louis Sullivan, which is form follows function, and I think that's been used quite a lot in architectural circles, but I feel much more, I think that needs to be extended to begin to think about form follows performance, and that how something performs or how well it does certain things, not just how it's used as a utility, but also whether it's structural performance or physical performance or visual performance, or any way that it behaves in a particular way that actually alters the experience of other people that are using it.
The beginning of the pandemic, it's a wild time.
Yes, it was intense.
It was intense, and there was a shortage of masks at the very beginning. Where we're standing right now is a historic site where you galvanize your network to produce a pseudo mask to help to fight against the pandemic.
Right. Well, I mean, at that time, we all thought it was kind of the end of the world.
Yeah.
And there was a shortage of masks, and doctors didn't know where they were going to get personal protective equipment. So what we did is We were inspired by some people on the East Coast that we started 3D printing masks with machines like this one here, where these masks were kind of leveraging our own ability as architects and designers and the technologies that we had at our disposal to actually manufacture masks that could be reused. So comes in 2 pieces, and then there's a third piece, which is a filter, which goes inside of here. And these were open source design that we had distributed from the internet, and then we were able to kind of connect with a team of volunteers, which started off here, USC Architecture faculty and students, and expanded to about 330 volunteers, ranging from students to professionals to school children all over Southern California, remotely 3D printing these masks. Collectively, we produced about 6,000 face masks and 11,000 face shields for 7 different hospitals in Southern California and 2 Native American Indian tribes.
It's incredible, and you would think it doesn't take that long to produce each piece.
One mask is about 3.5 hours collectively in terms of the build time for all of the pieces, as well as the post-production to put on the straps, as well as the gasket that goes around the side. And we were working very closely with our colleagues over at USC Keck Medicine, where, as I would always put it, we were the muscle, they were the brains. Right? We're not doctors. We can't vouch for the kind of testing of these as medical devices, but we could design them and manufacture them and produce them using our 3D printers. The biggest highlight for me was the kind of community that we came together and galvanized around, and the effect that we had of being able to connect with each other virtually at a moment when we were all so alone and isolated in our houses by ourselves, scared that the world was ending. But there was this kind of terrific community of people from all over Southern California and all over the world, because Operation PP was not specific to Southern California. It became a global phenomenon that was sparked by social media and the internet, where people are communicating remotely, sharing tips on how to 3D print, sharing tips on what files to use, what types of filament to use. We had volunteers that were printing. We had other volunteers that were volunteering that didn't have a 3D printer, but they had cars, and so they would deliver and they would pick up materials and drop off materials. We had sign-up sheets where people were saying, this is how many spools of filament I have, this is how many masks I've produced, can you pick them up? And we had pickup spots, delivery spots, runners, people were going around. Companies started donating filament, we started collecting money and donating money, and so it was a really positive moment in a moment that was, at that time, very bleak.
Absolutely. This is part of history now. This should be in a museum.
Actually, it is. We just, LACMA, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, just asked for a couple of these masks for their permanent collection, and so now we have 2 of these masks at LACMA.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
I think a lot about our human experience. In this era of social media, virtual reality, there is that lack of physical experience for our human experiences. I think architectures provide that experience for us. What does it feel like for you when you stand in an architecture that you designed?
It feels pretty great, to be honest. It also feels like a moment to be quite critical of what you've done and kind of find all the mistakes. But I think what has happened now in society is that so many things are virtual and so many things are possible in a virtual way, that the physical becomes a very tangible, experiential experience. Where it becomes something where, let's say, virtual spaces now are transactional, and the transactions that used to happen in physical space, whether it's shopping or exchanging or all of those types of things, now are spaces for experience, right? You don't go to retail spaces necessarily to buy, you go to experience. You can buy online, but you can't experience online. And I think the experience is something where you can actually get more than the transaction, right? So it means that you can go to a physical space and you can touch, you can feel, you can smell, and you can kind of also have that kind of cultural moment of actually understanding more than the product itself, understanding the experience and the brand and the identity of the things that you're purchasing.
And I think as human beings, it's part of our DNA to crave that.
Oh, absolutely.
Experience, to crave that physical experience where it gives us goosebumps and the chill and the excitement.
Right, and I think that's where like the primary things about designing experiences, because I think that's what architects do now, is you actually design experiences. And those experiences that we design, one, they have to do what they're supposed to do, meaning like if it's a meal, it has to be a good meal. But for it to really be something special, it has to go beyond being a good meal. So like a building has to do more than just its base utility. It has to stimulate a little bit more, whether that's through novelty, being different, or it's through connection in terms of actually relating to people and actually connecting to them in a way that is special and meaningful to them.
黄树飞认为，要想教育和栽培一个学生，那重点并不在于要教会他们某些技巧，或者呢帮他们开阔这种设计的思路，或者呢教他们一些理念。更重要的呢是让他们用所学的知识呢去服务于社会和大众。那下期节目呢，我们将继续跟黄树飞一起聊一聊他的传奇建筑之旅。好了，那今天的节目就到这里，我们下周再会。